see every one of you. Now, this presentation is about citizen engagement in nuclear governance. It's a case study of local information committees in France. This presentation actually is part of a big project which is about local experience from France, South Korea, and China. This is a comparative case study. And the starting point of this project is that we wanted to know when public inputs can be integrated into nuclear governance. So what would happen? Would that bring positive impacts? And if so, how? And in what forms? And under what conditions? So these are the key questions that we are very curious to answer. And then, indeed, through our research, we did find 3 very interesting local experiences. In France, we can see that the experience of the local information committees can represent a model of citizen science of public inputs in nuclear governance. And then in China, the case or the experience of the Wanjiang CLI of the Panzer nuclear power project, which my colleague, Professor Daphne, will soon give a presentation on that, represent a very different model, which we call the elite citizen-led model. And then in South Korea, my colleagues they study the one less nuclear power plant policy, and that represents another type of local governance model, which we call the local government-led model. The local mayor of Seoul did play a very important role in leadership. So with this set of case studies, we want, in the end, by the end of this project, by comparison and contrasting this local experience, we would be able to answer these central questions to us. Now, I would like to briefly introduce our project team to you. So in each of these case studies, we have lead researchers. Daphne will be taking good care of the Chinese case study, and Professor Daidong Li will take care of the South Korean case study. But I want to emphasize that this project relies very much on our collaborations with these very dear collaborators. We have Alice from Stanford, Professor Qi from Tsinghua, and we also have Dr. Didier Cachemire. He is an independent consultant. He is also a part-time lecturer in the university in Paris. Professor Hills and Dr. Fan Xiang in Guangdong. So before I move on into the detailed analysis of the French case study, I want to provide you a bit of the background of this case study. First, nuclear power is a very huge topic in France for obvious reasons. Up to 78% of the French electricity generation comes from nuclear power. It makes France the most nuclearized country in the world in terms of the share of nuclear in electricity mix. It has a very long history in France. The first nuclear plant was built in the 1970s. The France nuclear fleet is now reaching the end of its initially licensed lifetime. That has policy implications. Now, in many parts of this region in Asia, in China, in Vietnam, the public debate on nuclear is more on the nuclear expansion plan, whether is a general need to build more nuclear power plants. But in France, the public debate is also focused a lot on whether we should expand the designed lifespan on operating nuclear reactors. So these are very different contexts in terms of public debate on nuclear. Now, what happened after Fukushima? One of the major nuclear decisions made in France is that to reduce nuclear up from the 80% down to 50% of electricity supply by year 2025. Another bit of the background of this case is that overall the local information committees there are currently 35 of them over France, is because every site of French nuclear installations, whether it's reactor or it's a radioactive waste storage site, they all are required by the law to set up local information committee. So there must be one local information committees attached to these nuclear installations. They have dual missions. First, to provide information. Second, to monitor the environmental impacts. Governance are very critical development is that in year 2006, there was an enactment of this new act, the Transparency and Nuclear Safety Act, okay, that provides an important legal basis of these local committees. Membership is pluralistic, a very defining features of this local organization. There are four main types of stakeholders there: local elected reps, reps of environmental protection and associations. So Greenpeace, they are very often members of this. Reps from nuclear industry trade unions, and also the last group comes from the scientists and qualified persons, let's say medical doctor, for example. The last bit of the background that I would like to share with you is about the institutional context and policy traditions. I wanted to make it upfront that the French institutional framework cannot be characterized in a simple way. My colleagues from France, like Richard, they can grasp the microphone and stand here for 1 hour to share with you all the important insights of the French politics and policy tradition. But now in this presentation, I just wanted to highlight a couple of characteristics that we think is important to our analysis. France is a country highly centralized, bureaucratic, and with elite character. Okay, in some studies, it make an argument that it explains a lot why the French people, they support nuclear relatively higher level of support than elsewhere. The second point I want to make is that the entire political system, as well, including the nuclear governance system, there has been apparently a growing emphasis on transparency, independence, as well as participation. This presentation is about the local committee of the claims, but we have to bear in mind that there is a very important broader context of it at the national level. So these are a number of public consultation and information bodies relevant to nuclear at the national level. We have the National Commission for Public Debates. We have the OPUS under the Parliament. We also have the High Committee for Transparency in Information on Nuclear Security. And all these developments, one of very important one, another important development is that these nuclear reactors and agencies, they have undergone important organization reform, and that is important because it enhances the institutional trust in these nuclear regulators and relevant authorities. Two very good examples: the Nuclear Safety Authority. It has been made as an independent nuclear regulatory authority by that year 2006 Act. Okay, but of course it's subject to debate how important independent is independent. So, but this presentation we focus on the local organization. But we do have very important observations on these important French aspect of it. The ENDRA, the Waste Management Authority in France. Well, so following the sharing of a bit of the background of this case study, I want to highlight three important concepts that have been underpinning our analysis. The first one is that, as Richard mentioned, nuclear as a special type of energy choices. So we see that nuclear power as a governance challenge of engaging the public. We have a sense that engaging the public is important, that could be beneficial in some important aspect. But that, indeed, are some important governance challenges. The first one is associated with the problem of time scale. Nuclear, as well as other large energy infrastructures, they involve a time scale often in the order of several decades. Okay? There is an emergence of unexpected eruptions of digital social movements, often in the order of a few minutes. The second governance challenge is associated with the role of the state and energy autonomies, and that is in the context of public distrust. Large energy infrastructures, including nuclear power plants, rely on large investment. And very often, they are also critical infrastructures, meaning that they are essential for the proper functioning of the society. And all this pushing nuclear decision to the national level. But at the same time, we do see that the emergence of prosumers, or the very proactive role played by electricity consumers as well. Another governance challenge is associated with this question. Is effective engagement of the public really a mission impossible? Why? It's because there's a huge contrast between the direct and significant impact of citizen actions. We know that citizen actions are real. They are making real impacts. They can block construction sites and cause immediately project delayed. But at the same time, there is a moderate level of public concerns on energy and environment. Number of surveys or public opinions poll find that the public attention on energy actually is much lower than economic, housing, and education issues. And these brings important policy implications or governance implications. Citizens are not always ready to get involved in public engagement on nuclear, but they may react strongly in later stage. At the time when the government or project proponents, they have less flexibility to adjust or to respond to those public input. The second concept I would like to share with you is about deliberate participation. There are a wide range of different forms of public participation. In our study, we are more interested in these deliberative forms of participation. Deliberative ways of engaging public means that it focuses more on empowerment of a more informed citizenry to discuss, debate, and then reflect on their own energy decisions or their views on energy issues, to promote public use of reasons and arguments. Social learning is a very important component of deliberate participation. It requires integration of diverse social knowledge values, knowledge of all members of a community. The last concept that I would like to share with you is citizen science. In this French case study, we find that this is a particularly relevant concept. Citizen science means that it's a science not developed by scientists. It's one that is developed and acted by citizens and through participatory practices. Rationale for it is to increase scientific literacy and, more importantly, to increase the capacity of people to assemble the tools and data to become more autonomous and make informed choices, and it would reverse the growing public trust in science and government. And many of us we are more familiar with this type of citizen science, volunteer bird surveys. In Hong Kong, we have these bird watching associations, so they are doing very good work in this citizen science. But in nuclear aspect, the French local information committees is actually a perfect example of citizen science. Now, our project is in the midway. We are approaching the halfway of it. And so in this occasion, we are very happy to share with you some of the prelim findings. The first finding is that these local information committees, we find that they make very important contribution to the production, validation, dissemination, and as well as the application of scientific knowledge. These are very busy slides. I just wanted to let you know that these are long lists of main activities that could be carried out by these local committees. They are very active. They have a lot of flexibility to develop what they do. Basically, they organize regular meetings, listen to what local citizens care about, analyze report, and then I want to highlight these blocks of activities that they move away from production to validate and act as a watchdog. What they can do is that they organize monitoring activities. They can be proactive. They invite an NGO which measure radioactivity to develop environmental monitoring indicators. Sometimes they can establish registries, inventory of data. And sometimes they can commission their own consultants to provide counter-expert views on certain reports or data or findings of the government of the nuclear regulator. They can also make pay appointments to scientific advisors. So after validate and performing the watchdog functions, they also disseminate those information and then make application of it in terms of policy development. They provide policy recommendations, and then in various occasions there is evidence that these recommendations are indeed adopted by the nuclear operator as well as the government as well. And I also want to highlight this point, that we can see that these local committees, they manage to move away from the lower order of public engagement, which means that informed, passively receiving information, to a higher order of energy public engagement involving collaboration and empowerment. These are two pictures showing you some of the main activities. This one is that the questions and opinion of these local committees were given to an investigating commissioner. Now, the second findings that I would like to share with you is that these local committees is a very French way of institutionalized approach that integrates citizen participation into regulatory framework, funding mechanisms, and actor networks. The message that we want to highlight here is that what makes it work, at least to a large extent, is that it's not depending on one single factor. It's a set of three building blocks of these. And then these building blocks, they create a set of favorable conditions in terms of regulatory conditions, access to information, supported by the Act introduced in year 2006, as well as the organizational reforms. Second aspect, resources conditions, financial mechanisms. Structural conditions, the internal structure of these local committees, as well as the external linkages with other parties as well. And all these favorable conditions, we see that they are producing or leading to some important and possible outcomes of this model. We see the access to expertise, competence building, rationality in public debate, plurality of views, dialogues, and deliberation, reciprocal trust that can be built through validation and watchdog functions of these local committees. So these are the key messages that we want to bring to your attention. So in terms of resources conditions, these local commissions, they do have a budget allocated by the state and regional governments. These provide you some ideas what sort of budget we're talking about and how large and what they can do with that sort of money. Largely, these budgets come from the General Council from the departments. I think in the French context, the department is a local administrative unit, quite equivalent to Chinese province. So it's one of the sub-national administrative level. Some come from the nuclear regulator and from other sources as well. The amount of the budget vary, but give you a sense that the three local information committees in the Department of March, the annual budget is around 100,000 euros. Not too small, quite a substantial size of it. So with this good money, these local committees, they can do a wide range of things. The structural conditions. For the interest of time, this slide, I just want to highlight the external linkages of these structural favorable conditions to you. These local committees, they acted as a nucleus of a network of information and expertise providers. And there are many spanning actors across these three sectors, from the government, citizen, and experts. These are the government organizations or authorities units. And these two are spanning actors between citizens and experts. And then the local information committee, importantly, they are connected to all these different spanning actors to a large extent through the national federation of these local information committees. So these are a very extensive and quite well-established network out there. So the last finding that I would like to share with you is that this French model makes some possible impacts at local and then industry and then up to the societal levels. At local level, we see that there is evidence suggesting there is improved scientific literacy, and partly address the problem of information asymmetry between citizens, the nuclear regulators, and operators, and the government. And they did make some improvement in terms of safety standards, environmental conditions, because of some very good policy recommendations. We think that it's also important to take note of what changed at the industry level. We see that the EDF, the single nuclear operator in France, they developed a more inclusive relationship with local residents. For example, EDF, they developed surveys inviting stakeholders and these members from the local information committees to develop survey questions together and choose experts. Okay? And then up to the societal level, we see that these local information committee, they raise issues at national levels through partly the national federation as of the organizations. One example is that these national federation, they publish findings of various local committees on nuclear waste. Finally, they managed to consolidate a strong position in the public debate on nuclear waste. So it's a collective effort and improve the policy legitimacy of some claim. And then occasionally, these local committees, they can work with the waste they're concerned at this national organization at national level, and as well as this one. Now, to conclude, I would like to highlight these points. The context, as Vanessa mentioned, context is also very, very important in the French context. There are lots of unique features that we can take note of in the French example. And in terms of policy tradition, institutional context, and the latest developments. And we also share with you that how we see this local model, they acted as a producer of scientific knowledge, and the mechanism of it, the three important building blocks of it, and what sort of favorable conditions that this mechanism can create. And we have some preliminary initial thoughts on the impacts on this local model. And while we think that it's definitely need to sufficiently recognize the public inputs of this local model, we also need to develop a critical perspective of it. There is a lack of evidence that scientific literacy and interest can improve beyond these local information committees. When you ask people outside these local committees, perhaps many of them, they are not aware of the existence of these local committees. Okay? And then there is little evidence that there is an integration of these local information committees project from small scale to larger scale, from local and then up to regional and national level. And we also have to be mindful that the existence of local support for an energy option or a nuclear project is not the same as building public support for it. And these local information committees are not tasked with opening up the nuclear options. The need of nuclear is not really a matter that these local committees often have a discussion on that. Okay? And this French model alone is far from adequate to address the governance challenges of nuclear power in France. It's not the same as saying that it's the limitations of it, because the original design of this local model is not for addressing all these nuclear governance. Okay, they are not designed for that objective, but that do have important areas, governance challenges not addressed by this model. So we have two questions, at least two main questions remaining. To what extent this French model can be transferred to other countries? And the second question is that, is it very important, and how we can move citizen engagement from local levels to the national level? So with this, I would like to end this presentation. Okay, thank you.